ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to join us today. This is the Future Mobility Forum and the future vision and how to realize the vision. What are the social issues that we need to overcome in order to realize the vision for the future? That is what we would like to discuss today at this business session. My name is Sayaka Suguro, and I'd like to serve as a moderator today. So now I'd like to introduce the panelists for today's session. First of all, I would like to introduce Ms. Yuki Matsuzawa, who is the environment and sustainability consultant who has provided service and support to the public offices as well as private corporations in assisting their efforts for the environment and sustainability-related activities. Good afternoon, my name is Yuki Matsuzawa, and today I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk about the future mode of transportation and mobility. Very nice to meet you. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Maury Robertson, who is the international journalist who covers a wide range of topics like international affairs, world culture, as well as social trend. He participates in he is featured by various media. So my name is Maury. Good afternoon. Climate change is not strongly recognized as the major issue in Japan. However, in Florida, North Carolina, in the United States, they are being hit by a huge hurricane. So it's going to be a major discussion point for the presidential election in November. And how we in the industry will be able to contribute to this issue, that is what I'd like to discuss today. Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. Next to him is Dr. Akira Yoshino, who is the creator of lithium-ion battery, which is used for mobile phones and EVs, and he's a Nobel laureate for chemistry in 2019, honorary fellow of Asahi Kasei. Good afternoon. My name is Yoshino. So this is the opportunity to talk about the future and the 2050. I'm looking forward to the discussion today. And my idea about this topic is that in considering the future, there are two different ways to look at the future. One is to forecast, and another is backcasting. The 2050, to me, it is a distant future. So if that is the discussion point, the backcasting may be the better approach. So today, from the backcasting point of view, I'd like to make some comments during the discussion session, and I'm looking forward to this discussion with all of you. Next, I would like to introduce executives from JAMA. First of all, from Mazda, President and CEO, Mr. Masahiro Moro. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moro from Mazda. Carbon neutrality is a major challenge to all of us, and at the same time, it is very close to us in our day-to-day engagement in mobility. And how are we working on the issue of carbon neutrality today? I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk about this interesting topic today with all of you. Thank you very much. From Mitsubishi Motors, Director and Representative Director, President, and the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Katakao Kato, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kato from Mitsubishi Motors. So back in 2009, for the first time in the world, the iMIB, which is the commercially produced, mass-produced EV for the first time in the world, and carbon neutrality has been the major focus to us since then. Carbon neutrality today, we have many challenges in achieving carbon neutrality. This is we are struggling to achieve that goal. But through today's discussion, I hope to have the informative and meaningful exchanges of information and opinions. Thank you very much. And we originally announced that we would also have Mr. Satoshi Ogiso from Hino Motors, CEO of Hino Motors. However, because of his personal engagement, he's absent. So we are going to have 5 panelists in front of you today for today's session. Now, the theme of today's business session is this. What is the Japanese style strategy for carbon neutrality. So the climate change is advancing, and the Japanese government announced to achieve the carbon neutrality by 2050. Various countries have set their own carbon neutrality targets, and in case of Japan, Mobility 2050 was set by JAMA, which is the industry, which is the core of our Japanese industries. Carbon neutrality shall not be the pie in the sky, but rather it is something to be realized through efforts. And what is the latest the strategy to realize that? And in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, the co-creation may be needed. And what is the potential of the co-creation? That is what we would like to delve into. There will be 3 sections today. First is about the ideal and the reality of carbon neutrality. So the specific the corporate visions to achieve carbon neutrality will be the topics. And number 2 is the pathway, which is a multi-pathway to achieve carbon neutrality. What is the multi-pathway strategy of Japan, and what are your views? That's the discussion point number 2. And the third part is about the new industry generating, new industry creating opportunities driven by carbon neutrality initiatives. So they are to introduce the reality of co-creation and the development among the companies. So first is about the ideal and reality of carbon neutrality. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the basic assumption. 2022, OICA, International Organization of Motor Vehicle Manufacturers, announced their carbon neutrality declaration by 2050. At the end of 2021, 16.5 million cars were EVs, which is 3 times as large as compared to 2018. However, today, 1.4 billion vehicles are in use today worldwide, meaning that the EV penetration is only 1%. So OICA is advocating the lower vehicle pricing, raising awareness of consumers, and the investment and the various countermeasures, and multiple measures may be needed. So EV penetration is stagnating. Mr. Maury Robertson, what do you think is the reason of this stagnation? I think it is because of the inflation. And also Russia and the Middle Eastern situations are so unstable. Energy prices are at the very high level today because of that. And another point, the other day there was a major election in Germany, and the administration lost and the AfD, which is the ultra-right, and the party won the election. It is because of the rising electricity prices in that country. So coalition in Germany is promoting green the New Deal, and the carbon neutrality is to be promoted in a very extreme way by the current administration, and that was reflected in very high price of electricity. And what used to be Eastern Germany is where the industrialization has been slow, and now they are burning coal for the power generation. So they are in the same Germany. However, their performance and the carbon neutrality and their performance and is lower in the eastern part of Germany, and also their economic performance is lower, and so there is the split in the country. In case of the U.S., Mr. Trump would like to promote the thermal power generation, the consideration for the carbon neutrality by him. So the social division and fragmentation may be the reason for this. Some people who are the high earners, who are protected by inflation, the people who have a lot of assets, they can afford to look at the eco-friendly approaches and the carbon neutrality. However, people at the lower economic and the range, they wonder why do they have to suffer from these the measures to promote the carbon neutrality at the expense of their livelihood. And so their livelihood and their income, considering all these realities, this the ideal vision 2050 has a lot of issues to be achieved. Yes, that is the reality today. And as the automakers and the auto manufacturers, you are in a position to promote the EV. Well, would you like to stop promoting EV? I'd like to ask Mr. Moro of Mazda. So currently it is very difficult worldwide. What kind of actions are you taking today?
So first, when we talk about carbon neutrality, I think the objective is to suppress climate global warming. But I think our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions, and then we want to pull down the emissions as much as possible. That's what we are talking about. But a good means to do that is electrification that we all talk about these days. For when we talk about this technological innovation called lithium batteries, the automobiles can now run for a longer distance. And I think EV has now become one of the most prominent candidates for achieving carbon neutrality through this means. So for the progress of carbon neutrality, as Mr. Robertson said, we have different policies by each country, and the infrastructures and the energy prices differ from country to country. So when it comes to sales of new automobiles, the battery EV is progressing in general in Europe, but still, in Norway, about 80% of the new cars are EV, but in Italy, it's less than 5%. Or in the United States as well, in California, it's over 20%, but in Alabama, you hardly ever see any EVs. So there's a great difference between the areas. And also, you talked about Germany, but with the German government incentive going out of the space, probably the sales of EVs will be more than halved. So that really means that we still have a lot of issues from the consumer side when it comes to promoting EV sales. So this timeline that we think of should be taken for a longer period, and until we have all of these conditions that are in place to move forward with electrification. I think it does take time. And on the other hand, in the meantime, climate warming is still progressing. So we need to look at the technologies that we have now, and we need to make maximum use of them and look at the technological options and make a lot of proposals from what we have so that we can reach as many people as possible so that the people will be able to use these new technologies. I think that is the most practical and realistic way to go. And that is probably the pathway for achieving carbon neutrality and also securing a level of flexibility in that initiative. So let me just say that when it comes to carbon neutrality, that is a must. Unless we do it for humanity as a whole, including Japan, we are going to be facing a big problem. So that is something we must do. I think we all agree on that. But then the pathway to achieving that goal is where we have to really look at, because looking at the countries, including Japan, it gets political, and sometimes the solutions are not really simple. So it's really difficult to see a very straightforward path. Am I right in thinking that is the way we are looking at? Well, looking at the industry and the society, when we talk about this comprehensive approach of simply reducing CO2 emissions is probably the number one point, and technological innovation is something that will come, and the solutions will change in accordance to the era. So, Mr. Yoshino, what do you think? Well, first of all, when we look at our current situation, current EV market, and also about the lithium-ion batteries and the shipment thereof, when we look at the first half of this fiscal year, let me just briefly talk about the situation. So we have been concerned about the 2023 issue that was last year, that on a worldwide basis, we saw a growth in EV sales, looking at all the data, and although in spite of what people were telling about, but looking at the statistics, it still grew, but the rate of growth came down a little bit. So now what about this year? That is probably what we are all interested in. And for the first half of this year, from January to June, looking at the data, we saw the latest data, and talking from the conclusion, on a worldwide basis, it is still growing. But looking at by region, for EU, as Mr. Robertson said, it is really, the speed is coming down. And now when we look at China, EV is on the rise, for sure. And Japan the EV penetration rate is not that big to begin with. And then the U.S., with the presidential election, we really have to look at how things go. So on a total picture, China grew, Europe came down. So on a total, why is it still going up? That is coming from the ASEAN market. So the Chinese EVs that were locked out of the European market ended up in the ASEAN markets. And so the ASEAN people not only looked at it as a CO2 emission, but they also have this issue of air pollution in the region. So in the ASEAN region, they are now really rapidly increasing the penetration rate of EVs in their automotive markets. So therefore, when we look at the latter half of this fiscal year and on to the next year, we shall really see how things go, looking at the presidential election and all these other political things going on. We shall see what kind of statistics will come out after all of this goes on. I'm really looking forward to that. So as Mr. Robertson said, as the world, we all know that it is something that we must do, but given the political situations and all the other sophisticated issues, we have other priorities. And Japan, as a country, also have its own priorities. So, Matsuzawa-san, what do you think is the key to making EV a social implementation? I am talking from the environmental side, and to socially implement this kind of device into the market. Simply promoting EV because it is good to the environment, if we just go with that story, they have life cycles. We have to really look at the pressure it puts on the environment, because EVs, when they are manufactured, it puts a lot of pressure on the environment. And the CO2 emissions in the manufacturing stage for the battery vehicles is double that of gasoline vehicles. And when it comes to the distance that was run, and when we look at the life cycle from the time of manufacturing all the way to the time of discarding, the battery cars compared to gasoline cars, we cannot really simply say that they are much better than the internal combustion vehicles. So given that, we should not really simply jump to the conclusion that it is good because it is EV. We have to look at the entire life cycle of the product and see how it impacts the environment as a whole. That is the way I see things. And another point, it is now more important to look at resource circulation, because for the battery vehicles, you need lithiums and cobalt. But in a short term, and looking at the manufacturing grounds, they are very limited. And when you have like political disturbances on a global basis, and you have some internal political issues that might impact the supply chain and the production cycle. So recycling the raw materials and circulating those materials is becoming more important. But for the lithium-ion battery recycle rate is very, very low at this point. So when we want to really penetrate the next generation vehicles, we really have to look at establishing a good system and cycle for recycling the materials. When it comes to recycling, this is something that we have to look at it as a society as a whole. That is, I think, what you said. But I think it's up to politics on the administrative side, because only with people who have the right minds, like people carrying their own plastic bags going to shopping, is not the same. Well, I think that administrative leadership is really important, and also the power of the private sector, of the corporations, and the passion thereof is very important. For example, in Japan, the lithium-ion battery is now being recycled on a communal basis between a community of businesses. And that kind of system, I think it will be really good if the entire world looks into that kind of a model. I think it's really important to look at things from multiple angles, and also the corporations need to take a leadership on this. But in that regard, Kato-san, what do you think about this? Well, as Ms. Matsuzawa mentioned earlier, looking at the life cycle and having that kind of perspective, if you will kindly show me the graph. This graph shows how can you reduce CO2 emissions by what kind of power generation you choose. So on the left-hand side is from coal and other fossil fuel. And if you only use fossil fuel, you can see whether EV CO2 emission is high or low, and also you can compare with PHEV and HEV. But as you can see, for thermal power generation on a life cycle basis, EV is the one that emits CO2 the most, is how we see this.
But the renewable energy towards the right-hand side, for example, the solar power generation, wind power, as we transition to the renewables, well, the EV will be lower in terms of the CO2 emission as compared to the conventional cars or the hybrid or PHEV. So the renewable energy based on the promotion of EV is something that we need to promote. And so as we see the increase in the renewable energy based on the power, and the power is generated based upon that, then it is important to focus upon the development of EV or PHEV. And as was mentioned earlier, well, today the demand for EV is stagnating somewhat because the EVs today are not very attractive to the consumers. So we need to consider the various the systems as well as the pricing of EV. Well, we as the industry need to offer attractive EVs to the consumers. And another aspect, which is also important, is convenience. So the drivers, the users, when they run out of the power of their vehicle, and where is the charging station nearby, they are not sure and they are uncertain. So that is the reason why they are not willing to buy EVs. But in the Netherlands, for example, well, there are the charging stations, which is the 1 unit per 5 EV cars. And the ratio in Japan is 1 charger per 23 EVs. So the ratio or the penetration of a charging station is not sufficient in Japan. So we need to increase the number of charging infrastructure, and also the usage of renewable energy is another aspect. The policymakers, the municipalities, the industries, the public sector, private sector working together, and collaboration is needed to promote that. Yes, all of these parties need to work together. And Moro-san, I would like to ask you, what is your view about this point? Yes, as Matsuzawa-san mentioned, well, the importance of a life cycle conservation as well as circularity. The circular economy is what needs to be accomplished, and we need to make efforts for that. So we create cars, manufacture cars, use them, and then recycle them, so that the society as a whole will be able to circulate the resources. Today, 99% of the cars can be recycled today. So the economic feasibility has been established through this recycling policy, the process, and many people made efforts for that. And then we have new materials and batteries. So how to also incorporate these new materials and batteries into recycling process? That is another challenge we need to face. Thank you very much. So so far we talked about the reality of the carbon neutrality. So not just the battery EV, but we need to look at the multifaceted approach in order to reduce the total emission of CO2 and the GHG gases. In other words, a multi-pathway approaches is needed. So what are the corporate responses to that, and how does it work in Japan? So Mr. Moro, multi-pathway, what kind of strategy is it? Could you please explain about the concept of multi-pathway? Yes, the highly efficient ICE or the electrification devices can be combined together to offer multiple number of technological solutions to achieve the transition to carbon neutrality. So that is the idea of a multi-pathway strategy. Automotive industry has already established the battery EV, PHEV, hybrid, as well as ICE cars. So all these different powertrains are available today. And in Japan, we apply these powertrains to passenger vehicles, K cars, large cars, as well as motorcycles. We have a full lineup of products. So this is where we are strong in Japan, and we can capture the needs of the consumers by offering wide range of solutions so that the technology can be fully utilized by many people for their benefit. So that is how we need to achieve the transition to new era, which is sustainable with a sensible responsibility. So as a power to achieve the carbon neutrality, well, the electricity is the best solution to achieve carbon neutrality. What do you think? So the power used for the mobility. So it is the weight of the vehicle and how much the energy efficiency and the conversion efficiency shall also be considered, and the energy density as well. I believe you see a diagram. So the electricity as a power as compared to liquid fuel, energy density is low, and the 1/40 to 1/80. So it is far lower. Battery and motors, well, the conversion efficiency is good. However, inclusive of that, well, whether it is the vehicles or the ships or the aircrafts, well, the liquid fuel is supposed to be the most suitable fuel. But of course, there are the strengths and weaknesses among all these different the fuels. So we need to consider various combinations in order to achieve carbon neutrality. So this takes advantage of the strengths that the Japanese industry has, and we can also make the proposal which matches the needs of the users. So we have technologies and expertise there. Dr. Yoshino, how do you see EVs in that regard? Yes, this is also related to what I mentioned earlier. To realize the carbon neutrality, battery and mobility EV, what do we need to achieve in these areas? So value of the EV is determined by the composition of the power sources. In Japan today, CO2 emitted by cars accounts for 14%, which is not so large. So even if we make automobiles clean, we can only improve only 14% portion, and the 35% emitted by the power generation power stations, because thermal power is used. So combining both of them, make up the 50% of the total emission. So what we need to discuss today is what to do about the mobility for the future, and the mobility itself is of course the focus. What kind of the vehicles shall be created? But in this new mobility society, are we able to reduce the CO2 emitted by the power generation stations? Because we need to introduce more electrification, but the electricity itself shall be created in a green manner. Well, the renewable energy source is the key, but the major issue is the power storage system, which is needed. The electricity it requires electricity is a low-cost material, but the cost to charge and discharge the power is the key. Well, the battery, the electricity storage and the cost shall be as low as possible in order to make this feasible. And what to do about that cost? The only solution is to use the currently available existing batteries to store the electricity today, and even today and for the future. We have batteries in the EVs, and the power generated by solar and the solar panels, the PV panels, in the world, it generates the power which can be stored in the batteries existing today in the EVs. So if we make the good use of the batteries in the EVs, we will be able to standardize and level the usage and supply of the power. So that shall be fully utilized. Can I jump in? So AI is developing quite significantly today. Microsoft, Amazon, they have their own. They have a plan to create their own And the nuclear power generation, like we're using the 3 Mile, the nuclear power generation, not just the cars or the in our day-to-day life. Well, the high power, high electricity society, the maybe is something that they would like to achieve. Meaning that the people in the world will be using a lot of the electricity in the future going forward. Do we need to discuss on that point as well? So big data consumes a lot of power, and IT industry uses a lot of electricity. So the same thing happened in the smartphones as well.
And for those areas, we talked about not looking at unnecessary information and then only focusing on the necessary information. So I think there is a solution. I think that is the only way we should go, because when we just look at the numbers, it's really hard to do, but we have to resolve this by technology, and I think it is possible. Okay, you said it is possible. But so, Ms. Matsuzawa, what do you think about renewable energy, etc., so forth? Well, when it comes to multi-pathway, I think it is a means that will be contributed to the environment if we look at it. Not only that, but we have to look at the remanufacturing of conventional cars and also extending the lifespan of conventional automobiles is also another thing that can contribute to the environment. For example, if you use about 50% of the parts for remanufacturing, and then if you have a conventional internal combustion engine car, that could be much more convenient, or that's more useful than a brand new EV. That is a result of some of the studies that we saw. So promoting remanufacturing is one way to contribute to improving the environment for sure. So we should look at this from multiple angles, from various perspectives, in order to look at means to reduce CO2 emissions. Yes, I think you said so. So sales of new cars is something that we always talk about, but on the other hand, remanufacturing is something about reusing and recycling parts and building new cars out of old cars. So there is a discussion of that might be suppressing the sales of brand new cars, but in places like China and Europe and North America, they look at this from a strategic point of view, and that way is one way to secure a stable supply of raw materials and to reduce cost and also to generate employment in this factor. And that is how they are trying to strategically somehow compile this kind of methodology. In Japan, some people are looking into this, but I think we need to have a more extended discussion across the country in this area. So the energy part is really big, but we shall also look at changing the manufacturing process. So in order to reduce CO2 emissions in the manufacturing process, Kato-san, what are the measures that you have been seeing? Well, in the manufacturing process and how to reduce CO2 emissions, I think there are basically two ideas. One is to minimize the use of energy, and the second point is energy is something that is a must, so changing that to renewable energy is the second point. So on the first point about minimizing the use of energy, that really depends on the shutting down the power of facilities that are not operating on a daily basis, and also in the automotive industry. When it comes to painting and coating and drying, that is where we use most of the energy. So if we quit the coating part, and we should look at alternative ways like staking films on the surface of the car instead of painting them is one way. So that is an alternative that we need to really look into, and actually we are doing that now. So not only using the energy, this will not lead to bringing CO2 emission down to zero, so we also have to at the same time look at using renewable energy. So that is why we have PV panels on the roofs of our manufacturing plants, and we can generate power from those, for example. And also it's the combustion part that uses energy. So in the drying and coating part, you really have to use energy in some way or another. And currently we use gas, so that emits CO2. So we should look at other things like e-methane, ammonia, or hydrogen that does not emit CO2. That is an option too. But in order to make those changes, we have to make investments in the facilities and equipment. And we want to really create a picture where we can really invest in those things. So the idea of carbon pricing is something that we have been taking in. And so that kind of investment is something that the industry as a whole should be looking into. So you're changing the manufacturing process and also trying to generate an in-house generated power by the manufacturers is another way to create sustainability. So we only talked about the automotive industry, but when we look at the suppliers who provide us with the parts also need to take the same kind of initiatives, and also the logistics people who transport the parts. We need to also make this as effective as possible and cut down the running distance as much as possible. So this is something that needs to be undertaken by the industry, the greater industry community as a whole. So as Kato-san just mentioned, just related to that, there is an idea of this battery passport. Going forward, we will be needing a passport for every single product coming forward. That is an idea that we are talking about, because without the passport, you won't be able to sell that product. That is a new concept that is being generated. But if you start this all of a sudden, it just creates a lot of disruption. So somebody really needs to do this experiment and do a test or a pilot. And it's quite an honor, but the lithium battery was selected as that candidate. So for the lithium-ion battery from 2026, we have the battery passport. This will become obligatory from 2026. So all the carbon footprint data will be included in that passport, how much CO2 was emitted in the manufacturing process, and also about the natural resources that came to create that lithium-ion battery, and all the other data pertaining to that battery will be all viewable in the passport. And unless you have this passport, you won't be able to sell this, and you won't be able to sell unless the points on the passport are good enough. So it's a lot of challenge, but we only have 2 more years to go. So by having this clean passport, what are the steps that need to be taken? I think there are 2 major things that we should think of. One is, as you mentioned, to make the manufacturing plant itself based on a circular economy and circular resource use basis. So you have to manufacture products in a clean environment, and that really has a great impact on the points. And also the second point is the idea of recycling. So to manufacture these products, to what extent have you used recycled materials? And this makes a huge difference in the points that come on the passport. So we spoke about recycling a few minutes ago. That is also very important for the batteries as well. And the batteries, of course, use a lot of resources. So going forward, I think recycling will become a must. So there's this new idea of direct recycle, which is different from the conventional type of recycling, is a new path that we will be taking. So we were fortunate enough, the lithium-ion battery was fortunate enough to be chosen as the first products to bear the passport. And then I think once those passports come on, we will be able to see which batteries are the best ones. And eventually, at the end of the day, all products will be subject to having these kinds of passports. So we should be prepared for this, and I think you take a careful look at these passports. So Mr. Robertson, I think this will change the world. So I think if the world, I thought that we should also be doing this in Japan, because for batteries and as automotives on the northern hemisphere in the developed market, it's technically possible, but there's a lot of disruption and we have a lot of political issues. But on the southern hemisphere, I mean in the south, global south, for the developing countries, they really don't have a lot of leeway to promote a carbon neutral and they are half of the global population. So when we look at recycling and reusing parts of the automotive industries, I think it is those markets in the South that you will benefit most from the use of those recycled cars. And if you are able to really receive these batteries with passports, including the Chinese batteries, the markets like Japan will be shutting the doors to these kinds of ideas. And if it is, I think it will work really well in that way. But that really creates a lot of opportunities for hackers as well, like a new business like passport laundering might come into the scene. So we have the pros and cons to this. So all of this, the key is traceability, and having this in the power and also in the manufacturing and also involving the consumers as well. I think this is how we should do our mind setting. So this is where Japan can really make use of its strengths and take the lead on this.
Yes, and this may be a de facto protectionism, so to speak. In other words, because the Japanese approach is so good. So one point I want to eliminate the misunderstanding. This system started in EU. So those countries not exporting to EU, you don't need a passport. But the EU, are they going to enforce this to other countries? Do they have the willingness and will to do that? They already decided to start this system starting from 2026. And Japan is not the front runner in that sense. Okay, so what I wanted to mention is that when it comes to the practicability and the workability, whether this program is practical or not, well, all the Japanese people are willing to sort their garbages and they classify them into different materials. However, other countries and people are not willing to do that. So inclusive of that, well, this is the POC or the demonstration of whether this is feasible or not, and results will be fed back in the future. So so far we talked about the multi-pathway strategy. So as we work towards the carbon neutrality, of course, innovation is needed, and the business opportunity will come with that. So how about the opportunity to create a new industry? Development of the new industry is another perspective I'd like to ask you. First of all, Kato-san, Mr. Kato, what kind of initiatives do you have? Yes. Well, for the corporate customers, we have the minicab EV for the corporate usage. We sell these cars. And at the same time, to achieve the carbon neutrality, well, the solar power panel they are placed on the household, and we also provide the system to utilize such power for various applications. And the energy management package, they want the total package for to manage the energy. That is their request. So as you see here, energy management, what does it mean? As you see on this graph, well, on top of the roof, we have the solar power panels, and so the clean power can be generated on the rooftop, and then the power is supplied to the vehicle EV, and so unless you have the sun shining, you cannot store the power. So during that time phase, so when we are not able to see the sunlight, and you can supply power from a vehicle to the car, not only one house. This can be also connected to the grid. Then if a society as a whole faces the power shortage, then the stored energy, the power stored in the battery or the cars, can be supplied back to the community by grid. So this kind of the system will be in demand more in the future. We have not perfected this system yet, but this is the area that we see a future opportunity. And another point, which was mentioned earlier, is about the circular economy. So we produce cars, and they become old, and then we can extract the used batteries, but they are still we can continue using them. So we repurpose them to change the application of that used batteries. So what we are working on today is for the lighting system. So this is with the PV panel, and the battery is used as the storage battery. So during the daytime, and electricity is stored, and at night the power is used to light the to supply power to the lighting system during the nighttime. So this is the demonstration we are conducting, and we hope to commercialize this starting from this year. Reuse, repurpose, recycling. So this is another area where we can see new business opportunity. So this is something that a company can do, but you can also work with other companies to create further opportunities. Yes, this may not be achieved with the know-how of auto manufacturers, so we can work together with the power companies, with the municipalities. So that's the approach we'd like to take. How about Mr. Moro? What kind of actions are you taking? Yes, starting from 2021, we have participated in the domestic super endurance racing. So we are using carbon neutral fuel and the biofuel to conduct a POC. And for the social implementation of the new carbon neutral fuel, we are conducting these the programs. And also, we are using the micro algae for the fuel production to get the fuel out of algae. So we can get the fuel, and this also has the protein, so we can use this material for the nutritional food as well. And by using the microalgae, domestic plant and the sewage system can be cleaned up by using algae without using energy. But we can reduce the emission of CO2 by using such materials. So the carbon neutral fuel does not give us a CO2 emission. So if we mix this 3% in the current fuel, the 3 million is the unit in the ownership today, and this will contribute to carbon-free usage of fuel. And the 4.5 million is the demand for the new cars, and 50%. Will be the battery EV, which does not emit CO2. So that is the magnitude of this usage of this fuel, which is good for the society, energy industry, the government working together with them. We can realize this the idea. Then starting from the scratch of activities, we will be able to contribute to carbon neutrality. So we would like to continue working on this research. There are many challenges, but these are the exciting opportunities. Yes, I agree. Earlier, I mentioned that the backcasting is the approach that I'm taking, looking at the 2050. So the world in the 2050, what will be the mobility in the 2050, and how about how the power source is constituted? There are some keywords. For example, they will be happening to EV, and also the autonomous driving. What's going to happen to autonomous driving? And then the concept of sharing may be ideal, but will it be achieved by 2050? And also digital vehicle, in other words, digitalization of the vehicles. And the issue of the electricity and the use of renewable energy, and the battery storage system, the electricity storage system. So all these factors shall be considered as we envisage the 2050 society. I think these are the keywords. So if that is the case, my image of the automotive industry by 2050, that is what I would like to consider as well. Lithium-ion battery is my area of expertise. So what's going to happen to IT industry and automotive industry? Well, I think we can have some visibility about these industries. Probably mobility by 2050. And the focus is rather than on the selling cars, but what kind more focus will be placed on what kind of services we can supply or provide by using cars. Well, a good example is smartphones. So smartphone is a tool, and it is a very convenient tool. It is a large industry. And what is benefiting from that is the platform industry. So what kind of business can be achieved by using smartphones as tools? So probably the same analogy or the same idea about the automotive industry. So extreme example is that you have a very wonderful car. So it may be better to fully utilize such wonderful cars in order to provide the services for the consumers rather than asking consumers to use those wonderful vehicles. So the usage as the storage battery is one example. All these applications are linked to create a new society by them. And then new business opportunities will be created, new industries will be created along with that. That's my view. So how to make them towards 2050, we need to consider that. But at the same time, how to use automobiles or the vehicles shall be considered and changed in order to achieve carbon neutrality. Am I correct?
Yes, that is true. So probably this was a challenging statement that I made. But I think when we look at the automotive industry in the future, this is something that we cannot avoid but looking at. This idea of sharing, this is something that will be greatly contributing to the environment as well. And what happens? The absolute number of vehicles needed in the world will be coming down significantly because one car used by one person now will be shared by 10 people in the future. So as an automotive industry, probably that is something that they don't want to admit or look at. But with all of this in mind, we really need to look at the picture of the automotive industry in the future and where we are headed to. And when we look at new business, I think the notion of this sharing, this type of business model, what are the assumptions that we have for the sharing business, I think that gives a lot of hints. So, Mr. Robertson, just looking back, we have talked about what is now needed to realize carbon neutrality. So in order to meet the goals for 2050 goals, I think we have the technological assets, and we have all the engineers in Japan. And also for the mindset of the consumers, I think we have a pretty high level of this mindset. So I think this is possible to begin with. So we're not only talking about ideals, and that is something we were able to confirm. And also when we looked at the idea of repurposing, I think that is something that really impressed me a lot, because my wife is really reluctant to buy new clothes, so she actually recycles and remakes and recycles old dresses that she bought before, and that is fantastic. So my wife wears a lot of original dress, so this part is Zara and this part is from another brand, so she creates her own hybrid clothes. So that is because it's part of the Japanese culture. So I think if you can say that this street lamp you see on the street used to be an automobile before, I think that is a fantastic idea, because it is a byproduct of your teamwork as a society, and you can see this being reflected in a recycled way all around your community, and I think that is good. And so it's like cobalt mining or not using child labor. I think that is a basic thing, but I think it gives you a lot of satisfaction, both emotionally as well as spiritually. And if you're able to share this kind of recycling mindset or brand, that really puts a lot of value in being a member of the Japanese society. So I think what is important now is to really look at what you can do as your individual self to contribute to carbon neutrality. It's not something to be undertaken by the government or by big corporations, but it's about what you yourself can do. And I think there are several points that we can really think of. So in my case, I think repurposing and having the street light that used to be an automobile is one thing that really came to my mind. So now, Matsuo-san, what do you think? And what should be Japan doing going forward when it comes to carbon neutrality? Well, today we talked about a lot of things, and we heard a lot from the manufacturers here. And I think the Japanese manufacturers have a really high mindset on carbon neutrality, and they are diligently making a lot of efforts. I was able to confirm that. And one thing I would like to propose is visibility, because when it comes to the contribution to the environment, for example, compared to 2013, how much percentages were you able to drop in terms of CO2 emission, or how many grams of CO2 are you emitting per distance of 1 kilometer. So I think we need to look at a bigger picture and see what kind of CO2 emissions are being emitted. And it's not only by the battery passport, but as if you see the price tags on the products, I think we should be able to see, for the consumers will be able to identify how much it will mean to the environment in terms of emissions. And then from the global standard, I think when people look at Japanese cars, they will be able to realize that it is very low in CO2 emissions, or it is really contributing to the to the environment. And that is what, as Mr. Robertson said, you can make it your own issue. And I think that is a good way of doing this. So in order to pursue this initiative for Japan as a whole, I think it really depends on making this your individual issue by each and every single one of us. So we still want to continue more on discussion, but now time flies and it's almost 1 hour since we started this. So before we go, we would like to go around the table hearing the impressions that they had. So let us start from Matsuzawa-san. Thank you very much. Given this kind of opportunity, we talk about Japanese manufacturing and we talk about the superiorities of Japanese manufacturing. We tend to talk about that, but today we were able to talk about how can Japan contribute to the world. That was the one impression I got from today's discussion, and it was a great honor for me to be able to participate in today's panel. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Mr. Robertson. Well, I think making it your own issue is one thing, as I said, and in my house, when we look at discarding an old hard disk or an AC adapter, we have a lot of new AC adapters because of my job, but then just discarding them as uncombustible garbage, I mean, you have to go all the way to the ward office to dispose of this, and just walking all the way to the ward office, I think I'm really proud that I'm making that effort. And I play the guitar, but the guitar strings, they are metal and they are not burnable. And so now in Japan we have a lot of bands, and the girls' bands, and we have all these bands. So if we gather all of these, maybe we should take them to the automobile factory. And if I look it up, they don't have such systems. So if we go to a guitar shop, and should I make a proposal to the guitar shop merchant about this? But having this kind of mindset, probably every one of us shall be able to come up with this kind of idea, and we will be more sensitive to these kinds of issues. And then we shall share this kind of ideas with the people who have power, like the corporations and who have the resources, and they will be able to take a lead in this kind of initiative and create the circulation of knowledge as well as know-how. So I started from this guitar string or the AC adapter being discarded, or about discarding of this used ink cartridge. I bring it to Yodobashi or Big Camera. But when you buy an automobile or when you buy something like a house, you should think about the repurposing and recycling eventually. I think that is something that we should pass down from generation to generation, and that might lead to further innovation. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Now, Mr. Yoshino. So this is my last comment. Let me talk about ozone. Well, actually, we are looking at the CO2 issue, but there is also another big issue. This is about the ozone hole, and that hole is becoming bigger. So this is a scary thing. And the fluorescent gas is the cause of that. And so what are the measures being taken right now? In these past several years, in the media, we hardly ever see anything about the ozone hole because it has been resolved. That is the reason. So we put a lot of diligent effort into this by so many people working on this. And now the fluorescent gas has been transformed into something that does not produce ozone. And so from the year 2000 onwards, the hole is now starting to shrink. So eventually, by 2030, the northern hemisphere will be back to where it started. For the southern hemisphere, they're lagging a little behind, but by 2050, they should be back to normal. So that is the situation that we face right now. And this is one way that humanity was able to overcome a major, major issue. It's not because of me, but it's what the UN is telling us. So this success story from the ozone is something that we should pass on to other issues like the global warming or climate change, and we should continue with these efforts. We always bump into walls, and we have all these issues that we need to be overcome, and it is a challenging situation. But we were able to overcome this first issue of the ozone hole. And on the 16th of September, that is exactly a month ago, the UN set this as the Ozone Day, and that is they have embarked on a world campaign for this. So one of the two major issues shared by humanity has been resolved. So the next one, for sure, by 2050, I am convinced that we will be able to overcome this issue. That is what I would like to believe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshino. It is very wonderful, exciting news. Now, Mr. Moro, earlier, the Dr. Yoshino mentioned about the how the vehicles will be positioned in the future society. So, inclusive of that, if you could respond to that, I appreciate it. So, as we work towards the carbon neutrality, we have major issues and issues right in front of us. Not only the automotive industry alone, but by innovating the technology, we should introduce new solutions. So that is the idea about the mobility, which is expected to evolve. So the cars will be the digitalized software in the vehicle. So it shall be the products which can offer higher value to the consumers and the drivers. We need to achieve the transformation of the technology and also to how to reduce the CO2 emission. But beyond that, CO2 itself shall be removed. So as the cars drive more, it is supposed to emit the CO2 today. However, as the vehicles drive more, then we can capture CO2. So that is the kind of the challenge we'd like to take up. Starting from next year, we are going to start the POC. So auto manufacturers, we have the mission and the opportunity we would like to work on. As for Japan, we would like to save the usage of energy. So that is how society as a whole shall transition to. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind attention today. Lastly, but not in the least, Mr. Kato, the impression of today's session as well as the future of the vehicle. Yes, as we worked on carbon neutrality, there are so many challenges, so many difficulties I mentioned earlier. However, for example, the repurposing, the usage of the power battery to light up the street lights. Mr. Robertson liked this idea, and I'm very happy that the message was well received by other people. And this cannot be achieved only by automotive industry alone. So we need each and every one of you to understand this importance and work together with us towards the carbon neutrality. And as for future cars, the data usage will increase. So energy usage and consumption is also expected to increase accordingly. But we need to make efforts so that we can reduce the usage of power and consider more about the environmental protection as we work on the development of new cars. So with this, I'd like to conclude my remarks. Thank you very much. So we would like to continue this session, but the time is almost up. So with this, we would like to conclude the business session for the Future Mobility Forum. Matsuzawa-san, Mori-san, Yoshino-san, Moro-san, and Kato-san, thank you very much.